Gerry Hutch was not going to be a pushover for the dedicated cab team set up to trace his dirty money. The monk lived up to his nickname and kept a low profile, and displays of wealth to a minimum.
There were major aspects of difficulty in relation to Gerry Hutch. He lived a frugal lifestyle, and there was no possibility of mounting any action based on his general activity. And secondly, the money that was stolen in the two big robberies totally disappeared. There was no clue as to how it got away. And thirdly, there was no evidence on the standard of proof required for a criminal prosecution or even proceeds of crime action of the involvement of Gerry Hutch and others in the suspected robberies.
He lived in the cul-de-sac in Clontarf, a small development of houses. He purchased it with substantial amounts of cash and assisted by a mortgage. I'm not aware that he ever held down a legitimate job. When asked about the source of his income, he would refuse to answer those type of questions.
Felix, we're here in the paddocks in Clontarf, and there's Gerry Hutch's house there. He was and is the quintessential criminal mastermind. If you were ever looking for a quintessential gangster, he's cool, he's quiet, he's clean-cut, he's big into family. He lives a sort of a respectable, leafy suburb, while at the same time maintaining his links with organised crime.
It's all very well to say that, Paul, but you've got to remember that Gerry Hutch and his gang carried out a number of armed robberies that caused an enormous trauma to the people that were robbed, the victims. Let's not be praising him as a Robin Hood.
Over the years, Gerry Hutch had cleverly and secretly acquired a substantial property portfolio. Besides his apartments in Dublin, he also owned property in Spain and Portugal. The beneficial ownership of these homes was hidden behind a complex wall of false documents and front companies.
In many instances, the fruits of the criminal activities found their way into properties. Property, of course, as you know, is the visible asset, and it's a question of tracking down then the ownership. And there were, of course, difficulties, obviously, in tracking ownership because not everybody puts the property they own in their own names. But I think in the way CAB worked, they were able to track down a lot of these properties that were in the names of people that had become targets.
Unlike most crime bosses, Gerry Hutch had an apparently plausible explanation for his income. While a prisoner in Mountjoy in the 1980s, the unfortunate villain had slipped and hurt himself. As a result, the Department of Justice had coughed up £25,000 in compensation. On another occasion, he received £8,000 as a result of a collision with, of all things, a Securicorps van. And he even collected a handy few bob in libel damages when a newspaper dared to call him a robber.
When CAB came calling, Hutch claimed that his properties in Buckingham Street were perfectly legitimate, the result of investing his good fortune in his old neighbourhood.
We collected up all of the old investigation files that were available throughout the city, historical tax files on Gerry Hutch. We were able to create a profile of him, his property portfolio, and also a profile of professional people who assisted him in the conveyancing of property, etc.
Every lead you got generated another lead or two leads or three leads, so the thing proliferated into a large number of separate cases. It was a labyrinth of cooperation between persons engaged in criminal activity in Dublin.
We did a huge amount of trawling of bank accounts in Ireland, North of Ireland, Isle of Man, Jersey, Portugal, Spain and America.
One line of inquiry led to the accounts held by Hutch in Newry and the records of the High Court testimony given by him in his legal quest to get back the hot money from the Marino Mart robbery.
In the transcript of the case, there was £300,000 in the account, and Gerry Hutch gave evidence that he was the legitimate owner. Now, if you strip out everything else, There you have the sworn testimony of a person that he has accumulated £300,000 from business activity, and that makes him liable to tax.
In June 1997, a registered letter arrived in the monk's home in Clontarf. When it was opened, the crime boss discovered that he had been assessed for tax to the tune of £500,000. That bill would continue to rise as interest and further tax assessments were made. Eventually, the cab would come looking for over £2 million.
This was new ground for these guys. They operated on the old traditional common law system. If they were accused of anything, their answer was prove it. The tax laws are the same tax laws as for any citizen. It's not up to the taxman to prove anything. It's up to you since 1988 to make a full and frank disclosure of all your income and profits and to pay tax on it. And if you don't do that, then the tax legislation kicks in.
That assessment will stand, except and unless the other person appeals the assessment and can demonstrate that the assessment is inaccurate in some way. So the onus of proof moves toward the taxpayer at that point in time to try to demonstrate that, no, I didn't generate this kind of income. That places another difficulty, I suppose, in the way of the criminal.
The people who dealt with the Bureau had great difficulty in coming to terms with that. They regarded it as a colossal injustice that everything didn't have to be proved to a standard beyond reasonable doubt as they would expect it in a criminal case.
Barry Galvin, the Bureau's legal officer, had by this time gained himself a reputation as a ferocious negotiator. Criminals who had ignored their payment deadlines had found it a costly infraction. Galvin's response was to raise the levy and hit anyone who reneged on a deal with a hefty penalty.
Throughout all of the cases, Gerry Hutch was protesting about the inequality of the process, that he was a poor man with no money, no ability to fund lawyers, etc. And in fact, at one stage attempted to apply for free legal aid, and it made a very strong effort to get free legal aid without subjecting himself to any tests or having to furnish evidence of his assets to the court, and of course he failed. He then sacked his lawyers at another stage on the basis he couldn't pay them, which was a complete joke, of course, to the forces of law and order.
Gerry Hutch's initial reaction was to instruct his solicitors and his accountants to contest the tax assessment. This he did during the years of 1997, 1998 and 1999.
There was a hearing before the appeal commissioners, which he lost, and then there was a hearing before the High Court where he challenged the findings, which he lost.
I give evidence in the High Court of the progress of the CAB investigation, and the deciding judge on the day ruled totally against Gerry Hutch. He then had nowhere else to turn. The next step for the Criminal Assets Bureau was to start a process of taking possession of his property and selling them forcefully to satisfy the tax debt.
The Achilles heel, as far as I was concerned, was when we got judgment and we judgment mortgaged the house in Clontarf where he was living with his wife, and then proceeded to serve him and the wife with proceedings.
This would have led then to a forced eviction of Gerry Hutch from his home and his property.
Including this home here?
Including this home, to satisfy the tax judgment that was there.
So he thought he could fight you, he tried to fight you, and when he got too close to the family, and he decided to settle, is that right?
He had used his wife to launder some of the monies out of the cash robberies. So the next logical step would be to arrest his wife and interrogate her in respect of what she did with monies that was deposited in a bank account in the north of Ireland. Gerry Hutch was very anxious that no member of his family be brought into the CAB investigation, and particularly his wife. He himself had no difficulty in facing this because this was his lifestyle.
The leafy cul-de-sac in Clontarf was now a blind alley. Cornered and with the cab meter running, Hutch decided to throw in the towel. But where was he going to get all that money that he said he didn't have in the first place?